Liberal Viewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 23rd edition of Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 14 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source tonight will be from Bill Maher's monologue last Friday night, which I will compare to the way he treated the Brett Kavanaugh anonymous accuser in the clip I showed last week, and he's done a complete turnaround. That, I don't know, that's almost political comedy in and of itself. I will also be discussing this breaking news just like an hour or so before I started the show. The New Yorker put out an article by Ronan Farrow and Jane Maher talking about a new allegation against Brett Kavanaugh from his freshman year at Yale, a party that took place in Lawrence Hall on Old Campus, where I spent my freshman year, although I was in the basement of entryway A, and this was apparently the second floor of entryway B. I didn't spend a lot of time in entryway B. I have no personal knowledge of this party where Brett Kavanaugh supposedly exposed himself to someone named Deborah Ramirez, who was very drunk at the time. I also don't remember her, although they were all in my residential college, so that's like 10% of the freshman class lived in Lawrence Hall, was in Ezra Stiles Residential College, and I don't know, I wasn't that social a person, so I don't have any specific memories of Brett Kavanaugh, but I do remember many people having drinking parties when I was a freshman in many of those entryways, and I did go to some of those parties, but not the one. I have no memory of the Ronan Farrow party, but I will talk a little bit about what I think may happen. I don't know. I think maybe this is going to sink his nomination. Maybe there won't even be a hearing, but as of right now, the White House and Brett Kavanaugh are pledging to clear their name. Multiple accusers is one of those things. I don't know. Well, I put a link down in the video description to that New Yorker article that's just breaking. I will talk a little bit more about what I know of the culture that Brett Kavanaugh lived in at Yale in 1983 and 1984, since I also lived there at that time. But as promised, I'm going to start with Bill Maher's monologue jokes about the Brett Kavanaugh karma problem, although he doesn't mention karma. After I show the Bill Maher jokes, I'm actually going to show you an AM Joy clip where I explain the Kavanaugh karma title. But before I get to that, I have two Bill Maher clips, one from this week, one from last week. This week, all of a sudden, the no longer anonymous accuser is a very credible psychologist, professor, which I don't know exactly why that makes her credible, but you remember last week I criticized Bill Maher for not taking this anonymous accuser seriously. You'll see he has it all turned around, then he tells some jokes, and then I'll compare it to what he said last week after we watch this 2 minutes from Bill Maher's monologue. Down in the video description, by the way, you can find the whole monologue, links to all my sources, also links to my clip list from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the corporate media here in the United States. I have 14 clips, and I'll have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end for those fans, but here's Bill Maher's monologue from last Friday talking about Brett Kavanaugh over here.
This time last week, Brett Kavanaugh was heading to be on the nation's highest court. And now he is heading to the world's worst high school reunion. Because anonymous is not anonymous anymore. We have an extremely credible woman, a psychology professor, who says back in 1982, when she was 15 and Kavanaugh was 17, Kavanaugh and a friend attacked her at a party, and Republican defenders are saying that we shouldn't be revisiting things that happened decades ago, which is what I say about Roe versus Wade. But their other big line is that, if we're judged by what we did in high school, my God, none of us would have jobs. Okay, well, you know what? It's true, we all did stupid things when we were young. I sold pot in college, but I never pinned anyone down and forced the pot in their throat. You know what I'm saying? Roy Moore is really, the Republicans, boy, they get in like Roy Moore is defending Brett Kavanaugh. He said what they're doing to Brett Kavanaugh makes him very mad. He's also very mad that he wasn't invited to that party with the teenagers. I'd love to. Party, it was 5 people. I only found this out. 5 people. This could be investigated so easily by the FBI if the Republicans wanted to go that route, an actual investigation. It's okay. I mean, it's a small community. Brett Kavanaugh went to an all-boys Catholic prep school. It's the kind of place where the kid goes into confession and says, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." And the priest says, "Dude, I was there."
And when I chose that clip earlier today, I did not know that I was going to have this Brett Kavanaugh story about something that happened in Lawrence Hall in the 1983-1984 freshman year, and I could say, "Dude, I was there." But I'm not a Catholic priest, although my roommate, who was also lived in Lawrence Hall, my freshman roommate, he is a Catholic priest. So, and I think he may have known Brett Kavanaugh because Brett Kavanaugh was really Catholic, but I don't know anything about this story where people were saying that Brett Kavanaugh exposed himself and tried to get this woman to touch it after they were all involved in this drinking game up in the second floor of entryway B of Lawrence Hall on Old Campus of Yale University. Back in, they didn't say whether it was in the fall or the spring, so I don't know if it was 83 or 84, but one thing I wanted to point out about that Bill Maher clip that I did pick it out for was at the very beginning, you talked about, such a credible allegation now against Brett Kavanaugh, the anonymous no more. Last week, remember, when he brought it up with his panel really quickly, he was saying, this whole thing makes us look bad. And I didn't think it was good last week, and it looks even worse this week in the 1-minute clip from the week before last on Bill Maher over here.
What do you think about this Brett Kavanaugh thing where suddenly, right before he's going to get the vote, and he's an ultimate suck-up and dick, Brett Kavanaugh. Well, he is. And he's only there because he's going to, vote with pardoning Trump, basically, and letting him off the hook. Okay. But now they're coming at him with this accusation from someone anonymous that he was at a party, which I find hard to believe. In high school.
And drunk.
Drunk. Okay.
Allegedly.
Well,
which I find hard to believe.
Doesn't excuse it. But sexual assault in high school from an anonymous source, I think it makes us look bad.
It's not going to stop him. He'll get in. It's sad, but he will get in.
Yes, he will get in. But I mean, is this something that...
We need all to pray for Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, okay.
And that kind of stopped the discussion there. So, but Bill Maher never said anything positive about the anonymous accusation. And this week, he never really acknowledged that he had done that turnaround. And by the way, the story that broke with Ronan Farrow, that I mentioned that happened in my freshman year, apparently various people have known about it all week, which explains something. I was reading the live comments along the way. I saw this one from Nelson 100. Saying, "I'm so familiar with the layout of Lawrence Hall, they may call me." Well, I guess there are only like 100 of us who lived in Lawrence Hall, and I did get several calls from a Washington Post reporter this week that I did not return because I knew I had no useful information. But no, the guy called me like twice one day and then twice, and I think this is why I got several calls from a Washington Post reporter this week about Brett Kavanaugh, because this story happened in Lawrence Hall when I lived there, and so they were just like going through all the people who lived in Lawrence Hall, and I was one of them. So yeah, actually I did get a call from a Washington Post reporter that I did not return because if I don't have something that I want to say, I don't really like talking to reporters because I don't even want to go into all that, but I am a media critic, and so you see that I have some criticisms of the media. And one thing you learn when you deal with the media in other work like I have done at times is that nothing you say is really off the record, and you really can't say anything to the media unless you're willing to see it get published. And so that's why I decided not even to call the guy back, because I didn't have anything to say. And anyway, I read the Ronan Farrow article, and I don't recognize any of the people named so far, although, like I said, I wasn't a very social person. So of the 150, I think there were like maybe 1,500 people in the freshman class, 1,200, I can't remember. And so there may be 120, 150 in each residential college that in the freshman class. And so it is a fairly small group, but I probably only knew like 20 of them or something. And not Brett Kavanaugh, not the people in Entryway B, I don't think. But I did promise to explain why I titled this Kavanaugh Karma. And it has to do with Brett Kavanaugh. There was reports in the last couple days that they'd been doing test sessions for Kavanaugh testifying on Thursday about this sexual allegation, and that he had gotten, testy and didn't want to answer personal questions, which is incredible given the memo he wrote for Ken Starr. That I read this was like a week or two ago this came out, or before his hearings. It was some of the papers that came out was this memo he wrote for Ken Starr saying not to give Clinton a break unless he apologizes to Ken Starr, who of course is Kavanaugh's boss, so he's kissing up to his boss, and he wants to ask him these really explicit questions. I don't even want to go into them, although you'll see Joy Reid reads it, even though it's Sunday, and she apologizes for saying the name of a female private part on a Sunday show or a Sunday morning show. And then she passes it over to Vanita Gupta, who brings up, who used to work for the ACLU and then worked for the Civil Rights Division of the Obama administration. I think now she works for the Center for Constitutional Rights or something like that. And anyway, she makes some really good points about how things Kavanaugh said during his hearing before, like when he was just talking about policy, made him seem really dishonest, which is also something Mazie Hirono brings up. She's the senator from Hawaii. In Mazie Hirono's honor, I'm wearing this shirt today. And I'll show that Mazie Hirono clip, and I will bring it back to the Clarence Thomas hearings from 1991 that I talked about last week, about how Clarence Thomas's answer on whether he had ever discussed Roe versus Wade made me think he was not credible before the whole Anita Hill thing came up. Well, I found that clip for you from C-SPAN, so I will also be playing that for you later. But first, here is Joy Reid and Vanita Gupta talking about Kavanaugh karma in this clip.
Get your response to it. Brett Kavanaugh, who apparently was getting quite churlish at personal questions about his past sexual life being brought up in prep sessions to go and testify on Thursday. Back in 1998, a memo written by the same guy, Brett Kavanaugh, proposed a series of tough, sexually explicit questions for President Bill Clinton to answer about his affair with Monica Lewinsky, shedding new light on the Supreme Court nominee's moralistic outlook and his view of presidential power. This, of course, was before we knew about Christine Blasey Ford's allegations. A little more. Kavanaugh, as associate counsel in the Office of Independent Counsel Kenneth W. Starr, wrote in the memo that he was strongly opposed to giving Clinton any break, and suggested 10 questions, including: if Monica Lewinsky says that you inserted a cigar into, I'm sorry for those, it's Sunday, I know it's Sunday, into her vagina while you were in the Oval Office, would she be lying? The memo provides a contrast to the genial, soft-spoken nominee who chooses every word carefully as he makes the rounds of the Senate before his September 4 hearing before the Judiciary Committee. This gentleman, Vanita, wanted personal, deeply personal questions asked of the President of the United States with regard to his affair with Monica Lewinsky, but apparently is chafing at the idea of deeply personal questions asked of him when he's seeking a lifetime seat on the Supreme Court. Your thoughts?
Well, it really makes you believe in karma, doesn't it? I mean, be careful what you ask for. Look, he has no basis for resisting these questions. It would be utterly hypocritical of him, given his role in pushing for some of the most, sexually explicit questions back in the Clinton investigation. But I think more importantly right now, we've got a situation where he's up for a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court, and his fitness is very much in question. And I will just tell you that, before Dr. Blasey Ford's story came out, many of us who had been in the room during the hearing day in and day out had real misgivings about whether he was lying, whether he was misleading the committee. He has no credibility going into this. His credibility was really shot. He has misled the American public about his role in controversial judicial nominations like Charles Pickering and William Pryor. He opened, remember, his own announcement saying, well, no other president has talked to so many people before deciding on a Supreme Court nominee. We all knew that was patently ridiculous. And he's had a real problem with lying under oath about access to stolen emails back in 2002 and his role in torture memos and the like. So he's got a real credibility problem going into this. But that kind of thing where his own history is in question, look, it is fair game. Dr. Blasey Ford has made substantiated allegations. She's gone through a lie detector test. She's asked for an FBI investigation. She's saying, bring more witnesses in. She's asking for more scrutiny. And time again, the Republicans they've been trying to ram through this confirmation from the beginning for political reasons. And now they have to stop and address what is a very serious question, which is disturbing, I think, not only women across America, but also men who are we have become a little bit more aware in the Me Too era. And it will be simply unacceptable for him to sit on the nation's highest court with these allegations hanging over him.
And EJ, this is a gentleman, Mr. Kavanaugh.
So that was all before this latest allegation. I mean, I don't know. It's still breaking, and if you read the Ronan Farrow article, it says that the person who made this allegation was drunk at the time, that she came up with the memory after thinking of it for several days and putting her thoughts together, and that she didn't remember the exact incident, but she heard someone yelling down the hall afterward, Brett Kavanaugh put his penis in Deborah's face or Debbie's face or whatever, someone using his full name, and other people heard about this happening, and I certainly never heard about it, but I don't remember any of the people involved specifically, so that doesn't make me a good witness, despite some of the things I'm reading in the live comments along the way. But the fact that there was drinking involved, that there are some people who don't remember it, there's some differences in the memories, and it's so long ago, and I don't know if it's going to be enough, but that seems to be sort of a turning point in some of these stories when there are multiple allegations, when one accuser is enough to, but a lot of these Me Too stories, when it goes from the single accuser to the multiple allegations, that's kind of when the balance tips. And when I first started reading through this story in the New Yorker from Ronan Farrow, I was thinking he might have to withdraw. I was thinking that's probably what's going to happen, but I don't know. Maybe they're going to stick it out, and no pun intended, given the news story. And I tried to think of another way to say that, but they're going to try to get him confirmed. There have been several statements along the way that they're going to get him confirmed, and I think some of that's covered in these news summaries. I want to show you. There are two long ones that there are four news summaries. CBS's Face the Nation didn't really do one. They started doing it when Margaret Brennan, before she went on her maternity leave, but now that John Dickerson's back, no news summaries, I guess. But there's a almost 5-minute one from NBC's Meet the Press that has all this stuff and some other developments. And then there's a long one at the end from Fox News Sunday that includes the whole Rod Rosenstein thing that could have been the big story of the weekend if Trump had decided to fire Rod Rosenstein yesterday, which seemed like it might be about to happen because of this New York Times story that I think is briefly covered by Chuck Todd here, and then covered more extensively because it's the big story on Fox News. And then in between those two news summaries, I'll have a little over a minute from CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper, and then a little under a minute from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But here's the almost 5-minute news summary from Meet the Press this morning. The best news summary, as usual, over here.
Good Sunday morning. It was in 1991 when Clarence Thomas's apparent glide path to confirmation was interrupted by Anita Hill's claim of sexual harassment in the workplace. What followed was the all-male Senate Judiciary Committee's callous treatment of Hill, helping to usher in 1992's Year of the Woman at the ballot box. As Time magazine illustrated, the specter of the Thomas Hill hearings now hang over Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Now that psychologist Christine Blasey Ford has accused him of sexually assaulting her at a party when they were teenagers. Late yesterday, Ford and the Judiciary Committee tentatively agreed that she would testify on Thursday. They're still working out the details for what could be one of those national stop what you're doing events and watch. Of note, as of last night, 4 people that Ford has said were at the party with her, including Kavanaugh, have said they have no recollection of being there. The Kavanaugh nomination is issue 1 for conservatives and evangelicals, and there is a gnawing fear among some Republicans that if Kavanaugh goes down, Republican candidates could pay a steeper price in November than they're already facing. Which brings us to our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll out this morning, which indicates Republicans already have good reason to be worried about November. Our poll found that among registered voters, they prefer Democrats by a whopping 12 points, 52 to 40. And if you are a close follower of the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, you know that's a significant margin for our poll. It's the largest one we have ever had during the Trump presidency. Last month, the margin was 8 points. And by the way, a month before that, it was 6 points. As for President Trump, his numbers are remarkably steady. 52% of registered voters disapprove of his performance, 44% approve. It's exactly where he was last month, 52-44. As one of our pollsters, Bill McInturff, put it, these numbers are, quote, beyond weak for Republicans, and that Americans are trying to send the signal that they're not satisfied with the way things are going in Washington, all of which helps explain why many congressional Republicans are watching the unfolding Kavanaugh story with one eye on his prospects and another on their own in November.
Brett Kavanaugh, fantastic man. He was born for the U.S. Supreme Court. He was born for it. And it's going to happen.
With Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hanging in the balance.
Judge Kavanaugh, are the allegations true?
Do you have any response to Christine Ford?
Mr. Trump abandoned his uncharacteristic restraint, tweeting, "I've no doubt that if the attack on Dr. Ford was as bad as she says, charges would have been immediately filed with local law enforcement authorities by either her or her loving parents. I ask that she bring those filings forward so that we can learn date, time, and place." Republican Senator Susan Collins, a crucial swing vote, fired back.
I was appalled by the president's tweet.
California professor Christine Blasey Ford alleges that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her at a house party in the early 1980s. Telling the Washington Post, he pinned her to a bed, groped her, and tried to pull off her clothing. When she tried to scream, he put his hand over her mouth.
She clearly considers this an attempted rape. She believes that if it were not for the severe intoxication of Brett Kavanaugh, she would have been raped.
Kavanaugh has denied the allegation, saying, "I have never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone." And Senate Republicans are pressing forward with his nomination.
Don't get rattled by all of this. We're going to plow right through it and do our job.
But McConnell does not yet have the votes.
By the way, there are like 7 of us that are undecided. It's not just me.
We believe Dr. Blasey!
Privately, many Republicans worry the party's push to put Kavanaugh on the court could come at a steep political cost. In the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, opposition to Kavanaugh is growing among suburban women, women over 50, and independents. 1992 became the year of the woman. A wave of Democratic women won office after Anita Hill's grilling on Capitol Hill.
There's still a lot of holes in her testimony.
Now some Republicans worry history is repeating itself.
I think this woman, or whoever she is mixed up.
On Friday, the hashtag Why I Didn't Report became the #1 trending topic on Twitter. And already, some Republican candidates are stumbling.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg came out that she was groped by Abraham Lincoln.
These are teenagers who evidently were drunk, according to her own statement. That they were drunk. Nothing evidently happened in it all, even by her own accusation. Again, it was supposedly an attempt or something that never went anywhere.
Joining me now is Republican Senator David Perdue of Georgia.
So that was Republican Senator David Perdue. I don't have, from Georgia, I don't have a clip from him. I will have a clip a little bit later of the Democratic Senator Patty Murray. Neither of those two senators is on the Judiciary Committee. There's this weird thing where NBC said, we invited all the Republicans from the Judiciary Committee. Oh, no, it was ABC said, we invited all the Republicans from the Judiciary Committee and none of them would come. And then over on Fox News, they said, we invited all the Democrats from the Judiciary Committee and none of them would come and talk to us. I actually have that in the Fox News Sunday news summary I'm going to show you in just a couple minutes. But I thought that was a really good news summary. The one thing that kind of got missed in some of these is, for the Christine Ford allegation, there's her, there's Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge. And I hear, even before I started the show, I saw there was some breaking news regarding Mark Judge and Michael Avenatti, the Stormy Daniels attorney, also represents a client having something to say about Mike, not Mike Judge. That's the guy who did Beavis and Butthead and various other things. No, Mark Judge, excuse me. Did I say Mike Judge before? Mark Judge, the guy who was supposedly in the room with Brett Kavanaugh at this party in the summer of 1982. So that's even farther than this 83, 84. They haven't said whether it was in 83 or 84, this freshman year at Yale thing, but I know that's breaking. But anyway, so there was Brett Kavanaugh and there was Mark Judge, and then there are two other people who were supposedly at the party, neither of whom remember it, and some of the news sources were like reporting and saying they denied it ever happened, but like one of the people is actually a friend of Christine Ford's and is saying, I don't remember this, but I believe her, and that came out in some of the news stories and not others. You'll see it doesn't come out in the CNN State of the Union news story, but I will show later in a additional clip that CNN State of the Union and Jake Tapper specifically does report that. But anyway, here's the news summary, about a minute and 18 seconds long from CNN State of the Union over here.
Hello, I'm Dick Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is on the edge of our seats after days of tense negotiations. Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans and Brett Kavanaugh's accuser, Christine Blasey Ford's attorneys, have reached a tentative agreement on what would be a dramatic, even historic hearing this coming Thursday. Ford's lawyers say she will share her firsthand account of that night back in the early 80s when she says 17-year-old Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her. Kavanaugh categorically denies the allegation. This as the White House is pointing to the new statement from a fourth person said to be at the party, denying any knowledge of the party or the incident. This woman, a friend of the accuser, Professor Ford, echoes the other three attendees, including Kavanaugh, who say they have no knowledge of the incident or even of the party. On Friday, President Trump pivoted away from relative restraint and began attacking Professor Ford, asking why Ford, quote, didn't report at the time, prompting an uproar on social media and a phone call from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell telling the president that his comments were not helpful. And as if that's not enough, it's also a huge week for President Trump on the world stage. He's heading to New York to chair the UN Security Council meeting on Iran. Let's get straight to Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley.
And I'm not going to have any of the clips of Nikki Haley, even though she did answer questions, she pretty much dodged questions about what she thought about these accusations against Brett Kavanaugh and what Trump said about it, that, she should have reported it, or she or her loving parents would have reported it. So where's the police report? Show it to me, please, or whatever his, snarky or sarcastic comment was. Anyway, that's what Donald Trump couldn't hold back tweeting. And the thing I learned in that CNN report that I didn't see in any of the other reports and I hadn't heard before was that apparently Mitch McConnell, the turtle guy, the Republican who they used to say was a turtle on The Daily Show back when Jon Stewart was there, and they had the whole turtle imitation of him. Well, he's the majority leader of the Senate, and he's the one who has promised that they're going to plow right through and get Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, whatever the problems are. And he apparently called Donald Trump after that tweet and said, You're not helping, dude. Well, yep. I don't think when you attack the woman, you're gonna help the case of our Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. Yep. Maybe it was more like that. I don't know. That's like one of the few imitations I can do, the old cartoon turtle imitation. But I did promise you the 2 more summaries before I get to the news clips. Lindsey Graham and Mazie Hirono are the first 2 big newsmakers I have in the clips I'm going to show you. And, you know, I mentioned in that last clip that Jake Tapper talked about the other people at the Christine Ford party, but never mentioned that the friend who didn't remember it said she still believes Christine Ford. I'll show that at the beginning of the Mazie Hirono clip in just a few minutes. But first I want to show the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, which is even shorter and has some of the same problems with the other people at the party over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, the stage appears to be set for what could be the most consequential Senate hearing in decades. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford has tentatively agreed to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Thursday to detail her allegation that President Trump's Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her at a high school party 36 years ago. Underscore there the word tentatively. Both sides still negotiating the terms of that appearance. The deal could still fall apart. New information could come to light. Either way, what happens in these next few days will determine whether Brett Kavanaugh cements a conservative majority in the Supreme Court and have a huge impact on the course of the Trump presidency. Midterm elections just 6 weeks away. So let's get right to it. Our first guest, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, a senior member of the Judiciary Committee.
And I actually will have a Dick Durbin clip. That's the final clip before the bonus Sandy and Dash clip I have for the bonus, or for the Sandy and Dash fans at the end. But the Dick Durbin clip is clip number 14, if you're following along on my list of 14 clips here. But now, and my main criticism of that news summary is it was just too brief. It lacked all the details, and it was mostly about, is there going to be a hearing or is there not going to be a hearing? And, you know, when I criticize these different news summaries, one thing I don't know, and so it's kind of a wild card, is they're all recorded at different times on Sunday morning. And the news was like breaking as to like when they nailed down the hearing and what the various, like the other person at the party, what they said, that I'll show you from a later part of CNN State of the Union, which was live from 6 to 7 a.m. It seems like it might have broken later in the show because they like added it later before Jake Tapper's questioning of Mazie Hirono. Before I get to Mazie Hirono, I have 2 clips from Fox News Sunday. The first is the news summary, and then the Lindsey Graham interview, which is like the most outrageous, focused on the Republican base attitude towards the Christine Ford allegations. Like, well, we're going to be nice to her and listen to her story, and then we're going to move along and confirm Judge Kavanaugh. And, you know, what do you expect me to do? Ruin this man's life because she says something happened? So, well, I'm going to get to the Lindsey Graham story, but first I want to show Chris Wallace giving a brief introduction, and this is where you're also going to get a bunch of information about this Rod Rosenstein story that was so big on Fox News and could have been the biggest story if Trump had fired Rod Rosenstein. Is it Rosenstein or Rosenstein? I can never remember. But here is a little 4 minutes, 14 seconds, Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace giving the introduction about both the Kavanaugh story and then maybe a little more time to the Rod Rosenstein story, and then giving it over to Mike Emanuel to give a longer version of both stories that I will talk about after we watch that news summary together. The final news summary before I get to the actual newsmaker clips, Lindsey Graham, then Mazie Hirono, like I promised in the title of the video. But here's the Fox News summary, which is definitely tilted towards the Kavanaugh White House version of events, as I think you will agree after we watch together over here.
Hello again from Fox News in Washington. Well, it looks like we'll have a dramatic face-off on Capitol Hill this week between Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and the woman accusing him of sexual assault 36 years ago when they were both in high school. Christine Blasey Ford has tentatively agreed to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Thursday. but her lawyers and committee staff are still negotiating the details. Right now, we can tell you about the latest Fox News poll, which shows this controversy has hurt public support for the judge. When asked, who do you believe, 36% say the accuser, Ford, while 30% say Kavanaugh. 1/3 say they're unsure. And when asked whether they support the judge's confirmation to the Supreme Court, voters say no by a margin of 10 points. Last month, before the allegation, the negative margin was just 1 point. Meanwhile, there's another explosive controversy whether President Trump will fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein after reports that in May of 2017, Rosenstein was so worried about Mr. Trump's behavior, he discussed wearing a wire to record the president and polling cabinet members about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove him from office. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo became the first top administration official to speak on this when I interviewed him yesterday.
Chris, I'm not going to comment on that in any way other than to say this. I've been pretty clear since my beginning of service here in this administration. If you can't be on the team, if you're not supporting this mission, then maybe you just ought to find something else to do. I've told that to my senior colleagues. I've told it to junior folks at the CIA and the State Department. We need everyone who's engaged in helping achieve President Trump's mission. And I hope that everyone in every agency, DOJ, FBI, State Department, is on that mission. And if you're not, you should take this time to go do something more productive.
And I assume that talking about wiring the president, talking about the 25th Amendment, is not being on the team.
Not remotely.
We'll have more of our interview with Pompeo later this hour. But first, let's get the latest on all these developments from Fox News Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Mike.
Chris, while there is a tentative agreement for this hearing, it is still not entirely clear if it will happen. Vice President Pence says in the end, the Senate will confirm.
I believe that Judge Brett Kavanaugh will soon be Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
But first, the effort continues to have Christine Blasey Ford tell her story to lawmakers, with Kavanaugh given a chance to respond. Chairman Grassley has threatened to go right to a committee vote on Monday if there is no deal. And a White House spokeswoman responding, 1 week ago, Dr. Christine Ford claimed she was assaulted at a house party attended by 4 others. Since then, all 4 of these individuals have provided statements to the Senate Judiciary Committee denying any knowledge of the incident or even having attended such a party. Then there's a controversy following the bombshell New York Times report on Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Advisors to Mr. Trump are strongly urging the president not to follow through on threats to fire him. Rosenstein was quick to deny the report. I never pursued or authorized recording the president, and any suggestion that I have ever advocated for the removal of the president is absolutely false.
On Judge Kavanaugh, with a 51-49 Republican majority, the key will be keeping the GOP unified. Chris?
Mike Emanuel reporting from Capitol Hill. Mike, thanks for that. Joining me now, a key member of the Judiciary Committee, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. We should note, for the second week in a row, we invited all 10 committee Democrats to join us, and for the second week, none of them accepted. And with that, Senator Graham, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
You must be mean.
Well, or they don't want to talk. What's the...
So I told you about that earlier, that there were sort of dueling shows, that the Democrats wouldn't go on Fox News and the Republicans wouldn't go on, I believe it was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. It might have been Meet the President. I'm pretty sure it was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where George Stephanopoulos said the Republicans from the Judiciary Committee wouldn't go on his show. You saw the whole spin there from Fox News Sunday, where they basically said, all the other people are against Christine Blasey Ford's version, which isn't exactly true, as I'll show you in the clip after next with the introduction to Mazie Hirono on CNN State of the Union. After, I got to show you, you saw Lindsey Graham right there at the beginning of that clip. There's actually 8 minutes, 50 seconds of Lindsey Graham talking about the Kavanaugh nomination. I took out about 2 minutes, 20 seconds in the middle, where he's basically talking about Mazie Hirono's statement that the men who are dissing Christine Ford should step up and shut up or whatever. That whole thing. That I'm going to show you that clip, and I'm actually going to criticize Jake Tapper for not actually asking Mazie Hirono about it. But I've seen that over and over again on Fox News. It's not. Fox News doesn't get any credit for showing that clip, and that's why I cut it out of the Lindsey Graham clip you're about to see, which where Chris Wallace, first he starts off where you'll see this question. I'm not making this up. Chris Wallace's question eventually becomes, at one point you just get fed up with the demands of this Christine Blasey Ford woman on your committee, like dictating terms to your committee. That's the actual first question you're going to see from Chris Wallace. Not the entire question, but that is an accurate paraphrase of pretty much the end of the question. And then there'll be various follow-ups about how, if you're not nice enough to her, it's going to look bad to Republicans. Don't you realize that? And the things Lindsey Graham says are pretty ridiculous. First he says, I saw some of the live viewers talking about this as to whether there was a statute of limitations in Maryland where the Christine Ford's supposed attempted rape occurred at the hands of Brett Kavanaugh. There's no statute of limitations on that, or kidnapping, which moving someone into a room and against their will and keeping them there, that actually fits the elements of kidnapping possibly. And there's been some talk that there may be a Maryland criminal investigation, since there is no statute of limitations in Maryland on these type of accusations, especially with the minor, since Christine Blasey Ford was only 15 years old at the time. And that's actually something that the one saving grace of this terrible interview, or softball interview, I guess, from Chris Wallace. The saving grace is at one point near the end here, he does point out, there is no statute of limitations in Maryland. So thank you for that, Chris Wallace, but otherwise, fairly bogus interview. And this is like the worst look for the Republicans. I don't know why Lindsey Graham is doing this. You can tell me what you think in the comment section, but the way it's almost like we're going to give him a fair trial and then we're going to hang him. That's the attitude from Lindsey Graham to Christine Blasey Ford, for the first but not only allegation against Brett Kavanaugh, apparently, although they didn't know that at the time this clip was recorded over here.
What's the latest on negotiations over having this hearing? What issues have been settled? What issues are still outstanding? And how close are you to getting fed up with a witness dictating to the committee the terms of her testimony?
Well, Chairman Grassley's bent over backwards to make this happen. The offer is Thursday at 10 o'clock. She made 10 conditions through her lawyer. We accepted 6. We're not going to turn over to the other side. But this is Dr. Ford, Kavanaugh, and we'll hire our own counsel. They contest those two things. If they continue to contest those two things, they won't be a hearing. If they really want to be heard, they can be heard in a small room with a lot of security, limited press availability. She'll be treated fairly, but we're not going to turn the hearing over to her lawyers, and we'll see. I hope she comes. I will listen if she does.
So are you saying that the committee has basically given her a take it or leave it? These are the conditions. We've bent enough. Here are the conditions. You either accept this or there'll be no hearing?
Well, she made 10 conditions, a request for 10. We gave 6. We're not going to let her determine how many people we call. We're going to call Dr. Ford, then Mr. Kavanaugh, is the way you would do it in any other situation. And we will hire our own lawyers, and that's it. If they can't accept that, that means they really don't want to testify. Judge Kavanaugh is ready to go right now, Monday, Thursday, anytime. And here's what I tell my colleagues. This accusation has to be looked at in terms of our legal system. It's too old for a criminal trial. Is 36 years old. You couldn't bring a civil suit because you can't tell the court what time it happened and where it happened. And if you tried to get a warrant based on this, you couldn't get a warrant because the 3 people named by Dr. Ford as having been at the party outside of Kavanaugh all say they don't know what she's talking about. So you couldn't go to criminal trial. You couldn't sue civilly. You couldn't even get a warrant. But I will listen to what she has to say.
I want to ask you about one of these conditions, or one of the things that you've rejected, the idea that an outside counsel, a woman, will do the questioning for your side.
Yeah.
Is that pure optics? Is that basically that the 11 men who were on the Republican side of the Judiciary Committee don't want to be seen as being disrespectful or insensitive to a woman who says that she was the victim of sexual abuse?
Well, we got 11 politicians who haven't done a trial in about 20 years. I thought it'd be really smart to have somebody come in and knows what the hell they're doing, to ask the questions, to be respectful. You know, I don't know what Dr. Ford expected us to do with an anonymous letter. If she wanted to stay anonymous, those who betrayed her need to apologize, but she will be treated respectfully, but she will be challenged, just like Judge Kavanaugh. When I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan, I wasn't just a white male Republican. I was some kind of really smart, wonderful person. I know what the game is here. I am no different now than I was then. I may ask questions if I feel a need to, but I think it'd be smart to have a professional litigator do this. Give Ms. Ford, Dr. Ford, a chance to be heard. Give Judge Kavanaugh a chance to be heard. Compare what she says with everything else in the record, and I'll make a decision.
President Trump was pretty restrained on this issue until Friday when he tweeted this. I have no doubt that if the attack on Dr. Ford was as bad as she says, charges would have been immediately filed. I ask that she bring those filings forward so that we can learn date, time, and place. Now, you know, and I know, that Ford has said that she didn't say anything about this to anyone for decades, and that brought, the president's tweet, a sharp response from one of the few undecided key Republican senators, Susan Collins. Take a look.
I was appalled by the president's tweet. We know that allegations of sexual assault are one of the most unreported crimes that exist. So I thought that the president's tweet was completely inappropriate and wrong.
Senator, does the president realize, and frankly, do you realize, that if you're seen, if all of you are seen as not treating this woman sensitively, respectfully, that this nomination could go down?
Well, here's what I do know. I was a prosecutor, defense attorney, and a judge. For every woman that comes forward regarding an allegation like this, God only knows how many never come forward. Also know that sometimes people are accused of things they didn't do. I would advise the president to let us handle this.
Senator, I'm sure that some of the people listening to you would say, you know, you've several times now you've talked about how weak her case is, how long ago it was, the lack of details, the lack of any corroborating evidence. Do you have an open mind on this, and is there anything that Dr. Ford could say that would persuade you to vote against Kavanaugh's nomination? Honestly.
I want to listen to her, but I'm being honest with you and everybody else. What do you expect me to do? You can't bring it in a criminal court. You would never sue civilly. You couldn't even get a warrant. What am I supposed to do? Go ahead and ruin this guy's life based on an accusation. I don't know when it happened. I don't know where it happened. And everybody named in regard to being there said it didn't happen. I'm just being honest. Unless there's something more, no, I'm not going to ruin Judge Kavanaugh's life over this. But she should come forward. She should have her say. She will be respectfully treated. What did you expect us to do with an anonymous letter to begin with? What do you expect somebody to do with an accusation this vague, not verified in any way? Bring it forward. I will listen. But I'm not going to play a game here and tell you this will wipe out his entire life, because if nothing changes, it won't with me.
I just want to point out as a fact, and I want to move on because we're running out of time, that there is no statute of limitations on sex assault cases in Maryland. So there are weaknesses with the case, obviously, but she could legally bring it. I just want to turn...
Well, it would go nowhere.
Okay.
Okay, it would go nowhere. There are weaknesses with the case, obviously. I don't know. I think I pretty much criticized that Fox News Sunday interview of Lindsey Graham before I showed her, though there were multiple other things in there I could have talked about. The way they highlighted parts of Trump's tweet and left out the part where he implied, well, you know, if your parents didn't report this, they probably didn't love you. That was, I don't know, is that just me? No, that's definitely implied in that Trump tweet. And I don't know, that was just ridiculous. Fox News bias. Lindsey Graham's responses also, like I said, represented the worst face of the Republican Party in the Me Too era. I think they're going down. Now I'm thinking maybe they're going to lose the Senate. I didn't even dare to hope. And are they going to lose Texas? Is that going to happen? Are they going to lose the Senate in Texas? That would be, anyway. That would show there's a huge blue wave, and I don't know, it could happen. But you notice one of the other things that Lindsey Graham got away with is talking about how the other people at the party, all of them are saying that it didn't happen, and that's not exactly true. And I'm going to show that in the Jake Tapper introduction. And like I said, maybe that didn't come out when Fox News Sunday was recording that interview. I'm not sure, but because the Jake Tapper show on CNN State of the Union, that's actually live. You'll see there it says live down in the bottom right-hand corner. But before I show that clip where Jake Tapper talks about how the one person who doesn't remember the party who was there, according to Christine Ford, says she believes Christine Ford, I want to show the thing I'm going to criticize Jake Tapper for when he questions Mazie Hirono, the senator from Hawaii who's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, who makes some very good points. But she said this thing that I cut out of that last clip because I've seen it so many times on Fox News this week where she told men to shut up. A Democratic woman senator told men to shut up. This is it. This is what we've been warning you about all these years. They're gonna take away our rights to speak as men. They hate men. They all hate men. That's what we've been warning you about for years on Fox News. And so they've been playing that clip over and over, and they actually asked Lindsey Graham about it, and he said, well, they didn't tell me to shut up when I voted for Elena Kagan, I think, when I voted for Sotomayor and Kagan, they didn't tell me to shut up then. That was his response. So that's what I cut out of that last clip, so it wouldn't be 8 minutes and 50 seconds long. It was only 6 minutes and 31 seconds long. Well, actually, Jake Tapper showed that Mazie Hirono clip in his teaser for his Mazie Hirono interview, but then never asked Mazie Hirono about it. So here's the teaser when he got finished interviewing Nikki Haley about the upcoming UN stuff in North and South Korea and Syria and other topics that I'm not going to show you clips for. But here's the teaser with the Mazie Hirono men should step up and shut up over here.
One Democratic member of the Senate Judiciary Committee wants men to, quote, shut up and step up. What does she want to hear from Brett Kavanaugh this week? Democrat Mazie Hirono from Hawaii is here to tell us next. And we will get you.
You hear at the end there, Jake Tapper said, and we will get you. I think he's saying, hooked up to your, so you can hear and everything, right? I mean, they have to hook up her microphone, her, body microphone. I don't know what he was saying at the end there. But anyway, he showed that clip of Mazie Hirono saying that they should shut up and step up or whatever, but never asked her about it. But in the beginning of this 5-minute, 43-second clip from CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper does report that one of the people at the Brett Kavanaugh, Christine Blasey Ford party from 1982, that Christine Ford alleges happened in the summer of '82, that friend of Christine Ford's, even though she doesn't remember it, says she believes Christine Ford, which didn't show up in a lot of the reporting on the news shows this morning. That was the point I was trying to make with those different news summaries. Well, Jake Tapper didn't report it at the beginning of the State of the Union, but he did report it in this introduction to a long interview with Mazie Hirono, where she mostly talks about how she doesn't believe Brett Kavanaugh based on his answers to legal policy questions in his hearings a couple weeks ago. And I had the same feeling that a lot of his answers made him look kind of like a dishonest weasel. Can I be more clear than that? And it reminded me of the way Clarence Thomas answered questions about Roe v. Wade in the hearings that I watched back in September 1991, because I was an unemployed paralegal before I went to law school. It was during the Bush recession, the George H.W. Bush recession in 1991. And so I watched it on C-SPAN, and I'm going to show you a clip where Clarence Thomas claims, oh, I never discussed Roe v. Wade, even though it was decided when I was at Yale Law School. And it's pretty unbelievable. And it's kind of like some of Brett Kavanaugh's answers that Mazie Hirono talks about with Jake Tapper in this next clip, when he talked about how he was in charge of he claimed he wasn't in charge of the Charles Pickering nomination during the George W. Bush years, how he didn't get the stolen Democratic judicial memos from Manny Miranda. Those seemed, and various things were dishonest. I think she was also going to talk about the Garza case, but didn't get to it. And I will talk about all of that a little more with you after we watch that clip from CNN, which, like I said, starts with Jake Tapper updating his reporting to include Christine Ford's friend saying that she believes Christine Ford, even though she doesn't remember the party. Over here.
State of the Union, I'm Jake Tapper. CNN has learned that a fourth person, whom Professor Christine Blasey Ford says was at that party in 1982, where Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh allegedly sexually assaulted her, this fourth person has come forward and said that she believes Ford, but she has zero memory of the incident or even ever being at a party with Brett Kavanaugh. Questions remain as to how Ford will tell her story to the U.S. Senate this week, but a hearing appears to be on track for Thursday, and a source tells CNN that Ford is in favor of a public hearing. One Democratic member of the Senate Judiciary Committee has been making headlines this week for her fiery defense of Ford, Democrat Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, and she joins me now. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Good morning, Jake.
So it looks like the hearing will be this week. What specifically do you plan on asking Brett Kavanaugh?
There are a lot of issues around Brett that involving what was happening in high school, et cetera. But even before all of this happened, he had credibility issues in his testimony, 3 days of testimony. He's very outcome-driven in terms of how he views cases before him. And so I had issues with his credibility and how he went about things way before this even happened.
But you're not going to talk to him about policy at this hearing. This hearing is about specifically the allegations.
I would be wanting to hear what kind of environment it was in high school. Apparently there was a lot of drinking and partying going on. This is why we need an investigation. We need an independent investigation that lays all of that out for us so that there's at least some chance of some outside entity like the FBI doing an investigation. This is totally untoward because remember, during the Anita Hill days, there was an investigation, perfunctory as that was, but Dr. Ford is not even afforded that. Meanwhile, she's coming forward and very bravely saying, I will tell my story. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that she can tell her story free of intimidation, fear, and the kind of threats that she's already getting for even coming forward with it.
The Wall Street Journal editorial board wrote a piece about the presumption of guilt, they say. They quoted you directly to argue that a core tenet of American law is not being applied to Kavanaugh. They write, quote, the democratic standard for sexual assault allegations is they should be accepted as true merely for having been made. The accuser is assumed to be telling the truth because the accuser is a woman. The burden is on Mr. Kavanaugh to prove his innocence. This turns American justice and due process upside down. What's your response?
If the Wall Street Journal really cares about due process, I'd say that they should care that there is no independent investigation of these allegations. I think that this kind of attitude is what makes it really difficult for victims and survivors of these kinds of traumatic events to even come forward. You know, we don't seem to have come very far from the Anita Hill days. But as I said, for the Wall Street Journal to come out and talk to me about due process, or all the women out there that I'm hearing about who never came forward, it is really important not only for these survivors to be heard, but if their stories are credible, as Dr. Ford's story is, they need to be believed.
So 4 people said to be at the party Ford described have denied knowledge of the incident. Brett Kavanaugh, obviously, Mark Judge, who she says was in the room, P.J. Smith, and even Ford's longtime friend Leland Kaiser. So there hasn't been a law enforcement investigation, but there are these statements from the 4 people she remembers being there who don't remember the incident or don't even remember being at the party in question, according to her friend Leland Kaiser, who says she believes her, but doesn't have any memory of it. Doesn't Kavanaugh have the same presumption of innocence as anyone else in America?
I put his denial in the context of everything that I know about him in terms of how he approaches his cases. As I said, his credibility is already very questionable in my mind and in the minds of a lot of my fellow Judiciary Committee members, the Democrats. So he comes and, when I say that he's very outcome driven, he has an ideological agenda. It's very outcome driven. And I can sit here and talk to you about some of the cases that exemplifies his, in my view, inability to be fair in the cases that come before him. This is a person that is going to be sitting on our Supreme Court making decisions that will impact women's reproductive choice. He very much is against women's reproductive choice. And I can tell you 2 very important cases in which he applied the same standard but came to totally different results to make it much harder for women to get this kind of coverage. So there are so many indications of his own lack of credibility.
It sounds to me like you're saying because you don't trust him on policy and because you don't believe him when he says, for instance, that he does not have an opinion on Roe v. Wade, you don't believe him about this allegation about what happened at this party in 1982. Is that fair?
Well, this is why it is so important that there be at least an investigation so that there's some effort at collaboration. We think that there was a lot of drinking going on. As far as his friend, Mark Judge, not even testifying, that is astounding to me. He was right there in that room. He refuses to testify.
Well, he says he doesn't remember an incident. I mean,
so that means there's a lot of drinking going on. This is the environment with this school, apparently. And meanwhile, Dr. Ford has come forward and said,
I think Kavanaugh's lying, though, is what you're saying.
Well, I believe her. Let's put it that way. There's credibility to her story, and I'm going to make sure that I and others, the Democrats at least, want to make sure that she is able to come forward. And there's nothing for her to gain by even coming forward with this.
I want to ask you a question because I've heard a lot of people saying...
And there's more to that interview. You can see the entirety of most of the programs I take my clips from at links I put down in the video description. I really appreciate all the points that Mazie Hirono made there. I hope these hearings do take place on Thursday, although I don't know what all the stuff coming out. I get the feeling that Brett Kavanaugh may withdraw his nomination before Thursday. This is a Sunday night. Who knows what's going to happen this week? The news breaks so fast these days. But like I said, when I read the New Yorker story, I was like Brett Kavanaugh, the nomination's going from here to, I don't think so. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And then there's this additional Michael Avenatti story about Mark Judge and what he knows and how he's like he was like a blackout drunk in high school and when he was friends with Brett Kavanaugh and also did some other nefarious thing like having sex with a drunk girl. That's actually the allegation that Mark Judge and someone else when he was at Georgetown Prep had sex with a drunk girl. That was detailed in the Ronan Farrow story that I put a link to down in the video description. I don't know if it's the Michael Avenatti story is different or than the Ronan Farrow description of Mark Judge's girlfriend for 3 years when he went to Catholic University. And anyway, this is all like breaking news that I can't really investigate while I'm doing this live broadcast, but I do want to finish with the clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows. The one thing I wanted to pull from way back in 1991, the Clarence Thomas hearings, the whole thing that Mazie Hirono said, and like I said, I agree with just about all the points she made. I hope she gets to do some more cross-examination at a hearing on Thursday because she's on the Judiciary Committee. And I said earlier, I'm wearing this shirt in honor of Mazie Hirono. I put her name in the title of my video. And when she talked about how the lack of credibility on policy makes her already doubt what Kavanaugh's saying about the sexual assault allegation, it made me remember back in 1991, I was an unemployed paralegal between college and law school. I had actually I was a certified paralegal from UCLA Paralegal School or whatever. It was, I don't want to go into all that, but so I was home. I had cable. I mean, I actually had an apartment of my own and had cable while I was looking for a job, and I watched on C-SPAN Clarence Thomas, first his hearings, because I was interested in the law already, and I watched his hearings before the whole Anita Hill thing came up, as I talked about last week, and I already thought he was not a really credible person because of the way he claimed when he was at Yale Law School, he never discussed Roe v. Wade. Last week I said he never thought about that. That was a slight overstatement, but you'll see in this clip I'm about to show you, it's 6 minutes, 26 seconds long. It's either from September 10th or September 11th, 1991. I'm not sure, though there's a link in the video description to this C-SPAN page where you can see like a 2-hour video with a much larger context. This is Patrick Leahy getting Clarence Thomas to admit that he never really discussed Roe v. Wade or debated it, and he's never come to a conclusion about whether it was correctly decided. And I don't find this credible. I don't think Clarence Thomas was telling the truth in this clip. You can let me know what you think after we watch it together from 1991 together over here.
Judge, you were in law school at the time Roe versus Wade was decided. That was 18 years ago. Now I would assume, well, let me back up this way. You would accept, would you not, that in the last generation, Roe versus Wade is certainly one of the more important cases to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court?
I would accept that it's certainly been one of the more important, as well as one that has been one of the more highly publicized and debated cases.
So I would assume that it'd be safe to assume that when that came down, you're in law school where recent case law is discussed, the Roe versus Wade would have been discussed in the law school while you were there.
The case that I remember being discussed most during my early part of law school was on I believe in my small group with Thomas Emerson, may have been Griswold, since he argued that, and we may have touched on Roe v. Wade at some point and debated that, but let me add one point to that. Because I was a married student and I worked, I did not spend a lot of time around the law school doing what the other students enjoyed so much, and that's debating all the current cases and all of the slip opinions. My schedule was such that I went to classes and generally went to work and went home.
Well, Judge Thomas, I was a married law student who also worked, but I also found that at least between classes we did discuss some of the law, and I'm sure you're not suggesting that there wasn't any discussion at any time of Roe versus Wade.
I cannot. Senator, I cannot remember personally engaging in those discussions. Okay. The groups that I met with at that time during my years in law school were small study groups.
Have you ever had discussion of Roe versus Wade, other than in this room? In the 17 or 18 years it's been there?
Only, I guess, Senator, in the fact that in the most general sense that other individuals express concerns one way or the other, and you listen and you try to be thoughtful. If you're asking me whether or not I've ever debated the contents of it, the answer to that is no, Senator.
Have you ever, private gatherings otherwise, stated whether you felt that it was properly decided or not?
Senator, in trying to recall and reflect on that, I don't recollect commenting one way or the other. There were, again, debates about it in various places, but I generally did not participate. I don't remember or recall participating, Senator.
So you don't ever recall stating whether you thought it was properly decided or not?
I can't recall saying one way or the other, Senator.
Well, was it properly decided or not?
Senator, I think that's where I just have to say what I've said before, that to comment on the holding in that case would compromise my ability to...
Let me ask you this. Have you made any decision in your own mind whether you feel Roe versus Wade was properly decided or not, without stating what that decision is?
I have not made, Senator, a decision one way or the other with respect to that important decision.
When you came up for confirmation last time for the Circuit Court of Appeals, did you consider your feelings on Roe versus Wade? Should you have been asked?
I had not been. Would I have considered, Senator, or did I consider?
Oh, did you consider?
No, Senator.
So you have not. You cannot recollect ever taking a position whether it's properly decided or not properly decided, and you do not have one here that you would share with us today.
I do not have a position to share with you here today on the whether or not that case was properly decided. And Senator, I think that it's appropriate to just simply state that it is for a judge, that it's late in the day as a judge to begin to decide whether cases are rightly or wrongly decided when one's on the bench. I truly believe that doing that undermines your ability to rule on those cases.
Well, with all due respect, Judge, I have some difficulty with your answer, that somehow this has been so far removed from your discussions or feelings during the years since it was decided while you were in law school. You participated in a working group that criticized Roe. You cited Roe in a footnote to your article on the Privileges or Immunity Clause. You referred to Louis Lehrman's article on the meaning of the right to life. You specifically referred to abortion in a column in the Chicago Defender. I cannot believe that all of this was done in a vacuum, absent some very clear considerations of Roe versus Wade, and in fact, twice specifically citing Roe versus Wade.
Senator, your question to me was, did I debate the contents of Roe versus Wade, the outcome in Roe versus Wade? Do I have this day an opinion, a personal opinion, on the outcome in Roe versus Wade? And my answer to you is that I do not.
And his answer to you, I don't believe, was credible, honest. I think he lied at that point, and that's why I didn't really find him believable when the whole Anita Hill thing came up, and I still think, can you imagine if the Kavanaugh thing goes through and there are like two people with allegations of sexual misconduct, both appointed by Republicans, both men on the Supreme Court? That is like, I can't believe this Kavanaugh nomination is going to go through at this point, but this just went to the multiple allegations stage in the last few hours, so maybe I'm being precipitous in my announcements, but it is a live broadcast, and there are additional breaking news stories, so you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I hope you appreciated that Clarence Thomas clip from back in 1991, September 10th, or possibly September 11th. It's not clear from the link I put down in the video description to that C-SPAN 3 history thing that I think they showed that around the time of John Roberts' nomination. But I do have 3 more news clips for you, one from NBC, one from CBS, and one from ABC. These are 3 different, they're all, 2 senators, they're all Democrats, 2 Democratic senators, and then in between the 2 Democratic senators is a Democratic member of Congress from Northern California, where I live, Eshoo, who was the first point of contact for Christine Blasey Ford, who actually met with her in person and talked to her and believes her allegations. That's like the only person who talked to Christine Ford in all the news shows. That's why I wanted to include that clip. But sandwiching Anna Eshoo are going to be Patty Murray, who I wanted to start with because or beginning with Patty Murray, and then Dick Durbin, who's on the Senate Judiciary Committee and is the second in command after Chuck Schumer in the Senate on the Democratic side. But before I get to all that, I want to show Patty Murray because, as Chuck Todd points out in his introduction here, Patty Murray joined the Senate in 1992 as part of the Year of the Woman after the Clarence Thomas hearings, and almost as a reaction to Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, which they discuss here, and they compare Anita Hill to what's happening now with Brett Kavanaugh, and they were doing less, but I don't know what's going to happen now with the breaking news. You can let me know what you think, and I'll read the live comments after, while I'm watching this 4-minute NBC Meet the Press clip. Chuck Todd talking to Patty Murray, senator from Washington, part of the backlash to the Clarence Thomas hearings I just showed you over here.
Senator Patty Murray of Washington State, number 3 in Democratic leadership. Senator Murray, welcome to Meet the Press.
Great to be here, Chuck.
I remember covering your race, and it was the reason you had stated for running was your reaction to the Anita Hill hearings. And I remember at first, a lot of people didn't give you much of a chance, and you've now been a United States Senator since 1992.
Correct.
You said this about the Republicans 27 years later, that the Judiciary Committee is leading us down the exact same path and in many ways an even worse one. How are things worse?
Well, I think that one of the things that I remember from the Anita Hill hearings was the way she was treated by United States senators, that she was presumed that she was lying, that it was a fantasy, that she was making it up. That's how the questions came from the United States senators, and she was never given the full opportunity to be believed from the start. I sense that again as I hear a number of the comments, the majority leader saying we're going to plow right through this like it's this petty little thing over here. People saying, well, she's got the votes, we're just going to get her through, we got to deal with this hiccup. That kind of conversation is exactly what leads to many people in this country, women and men, saying they don't get it, particularly now in the Me Too movement, where women have felt that they can speak out, that it doesn't have to be a hidden thing in their past, that they don't have to not tell anybody. The message that it's a hiccup or we're going to plow through this is exactly what they don't want to hear today.
You know, it's interesting that you word it that way, because I'm curious of your reaction of this TV ad that's being run by Demand Justice, which is a group on the left that is opposing Judge Kavanaugh. I want to play for you this ad because it presumes him guilty, and I want to play it for you and see what you think of this. Take a look.
When 15-year-old Christine tried to scream, her attacker covered her mouth so no one could hear her. Will Susan Collins listen to her now?
I play it now because what you just described that was presuming her not to be telling the truth. This is presuming him to already be guilty. It seems as if we're in a bad situation no matter your point of view.
Well, here's how I see it. For a very long time in the history of this country, when women spoke out about allegations of sexual assault or abuse, they were presumed to be making it up, or culturally not talking, or told to be quiet. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important in this time and this day that we recognize when women speak out that we should presume that they are innocent. Look, if someone says, my car got stolen, you don't presume they're lying.
Right.
But if someone says, I was sexually abused, people today sometimes presume that they're making it up, that they're whatever. It should be a presumption of innocence and then have a fair process to go through to determine the truth.
Do you think a hearing where it's really his word, her word? We're not going to have anything else. We're not going to have any other witnesses, it appears. There's not going to be an FBI investigation. That's a tough... same question I asked to Senator Perdue. You're a human being. How are you going to determine this?
Yeah.
How do you determine who's telling the truth? Because it's going to be your own gut, is it not?
Well, the way the Senate Republicans have now set this up, that is what we're going to have, is do you believe her or do you believe him? That is exactly why we have been pressing for an FBI investigation that should only take a few days, so there are other facts out there, that there are other witnesses. In fact, I have said many times that the Anita Hill hearing was a disaster, but they did have an FBI investigation. They did have other witnesses. There were other ways to judge this. the Senate Republicans have predetermined the outcome of that this will be a he says, she says by taking that away.
This was interesting, but Anita Hill wrote.
So I agree with everything Patty Murray said there. And there should be I don't know, is there going to be an FBI investigation now? Is he going to withdraw? Is the FBI going to call me about what happened in Lawrence Hall in my freshman year? I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But I put that after the Clarence Thomas clip because Patty Murray was elected as a backlash against Clarence Thomas, and I'm hoping there will be another blue wave this year as a backlash against Donald Trump and maybe Brett Kavanaugh. I'm going to show another clip talking about what should the standard be, because, you know, I used to be a criminal defense attorney, and I believe in guilt beyond a reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence. That's actually not in the Constitution. I have my Constitution right here, of course. But it does say due process, and there are Supreme Court cases saying that beyond a reasonable doubt and presumption of innocence, those are part of due process. And that is something that I'll show Dick Durbin responding to in the final clip before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip. That Dick Durbin clip comes from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But before I get to that, I want to show John Dickerson over on CBS's Face the Nation. They didn't do a news summary. They did a lot of coverage on some other topics. But they did have one really good thing today. They were the only news group or the corporate news outlet that got an interview with Representative Anna Eshoo. She's a member of Congress from Northern California, like Christine Blasey Ford, I believe, lives in Palo Alto or Mountain View or somewhere in Silicon Valley, which Anna Eshoo represents. And she actually got the initial notification about this accusation against Brett Kavanaugh and met with Christine Blasey Ford and believes her, thinks it's a credible accusation, as she describes in this 4-minute and 19-second clip talking to John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation over here.
The first elected official to hear Christine Blasey Ford's accusations, California Democrat Anna Eshoo. Congresswoman Eshoo joins us from Mountain View, California. Congresswoman, good morning, and I want to start. Good morning to you, John. You talked to Dr. Ford. What did she tell you that would convince her doubters?
Well, Dr. Ford called my district office, and we met for quite a long while, for about an hour and a half, and she told me her story. My impression of her was that she was intelligent. She spoke softly. It was wrenching for her, I think, to tell the story, because there's a re-experience when the story is told. She went into many details, and at the end of our conversation, I told her that I believed her. And that it was important that she tell me if what she wished me to do with the information, if in fact she chose another path. And she did. She said she wanted me to take it to down a different pathway, and of course with anonymity and privacy. That's paramount in sexual abuse allegations or cases. Because the individuals are terrified. This is one of the highest unreported crimes in our country. So she understood the risks and the consequences, and it was a week ago today that she came out publicly because the story was, part of it was out, and I think that it took extraordinary courage for her to do that, because again, she understood the risks and consequences, not only for herself, but her family.
Congresswoman, we've last night heard from another person who Ford said was at the party, Leland Kaiser. She says she has no recollection of being at the party. That means everyone else other than Dr. Ford has said they either don't remember or deny that it happened.
Well, there are different remembrances to sexual abuse victims. And there was a third party in the room. My constituent alleges that. And yet that person, Mark Judge, is not being subpoenaed by the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I think that his testimony and questioning should be part of this as well.
He, of course, says it's not true. Let me ask you this question. You asked a series of questions of Dr. Ford when she came in to talk to you. What did you want to know?
Well, as she told her story, I asked several questions. And I don't want to go into the details of it because I promised her that privacy is paramount. But this is an intelligent woman. This is not a woman that is confused, mixed up. This is something that she has carried with her, just as so many victims do. So I think that as a witness, she will speak clearly, share her story, and I think that the American people need to listen. There's been a lot of talking. We have to do listening both to Judge Kavanaugh and to my constituent.
We have
I think that there's something else in this too.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Women share their secrets with each other, and women across the country are more than sensitive about this. So my constituent should be welcomed and given the respect that she deserves. And I hope that will be the case. And that her courage.
And I actually cut that off a little, but and then there was an additional question that was almost the entire Eshoo interview. It's the only clip I took from CBS's Face the Nation, but I think it's representative of the way a lot of women feel, having talked to some women about this and seen other women talk about it on cable news, and I think that it could definitely increase the blue wave, the kind of like I was saying when I showed Patty Murray as the part of the backlash to the Anita Hill hearings. If the Kavanaugh hearings do go forward, and now there are multiple accusers in the Me Too era, and that whole "why I didn't report" hashtag was the #1 trending hashtag on Twitter, and the stories that you can read if you check that hashtag. And yet, on the other side, if you look at my Twitter, twitter.com/liberalviewer, at the beginning of the week, or middle of the week, actually, I kind of got in this argument with Lee Doran. You may remember from old YouTube days. He was tweeting a lot and really viciously attacking Christine Blasey Ford, the only Kavanaugh accuser in the middle of the week, not so much anymore, but I don't know why people in Trump's base and the right-wing people, they're so viciously, I mean, I wasn't viciously attacking Brett Kavanaugh. Well, I guess I did just call Kavanaugh a weasel. But that was after watching him answer a bunch of questions. I don't have any reason to have any opinion of Christine Blasey Ford. That I don't know what that's all about. Why people on the right are so sure she's like a liar and it's all a setup, and I don't know. It's the alternative Fox News universe, and anyway, I am almost running out of time. It's already 7:59 p.m. Pacific time. I wanted to finish this up in 90 minutes, and I only have a couple minutes left. And this next clip is actually Senator Dick Durbin, the second in command among the Democrats after Chuck Schumer of New York. He's on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, answering the question, is there any way to know who's telling the truth with this he said, she said thing? And Also talking about what the standard is. Remember, this isn't a criminal trial. It's like a job interview. I used to do criminal trials, some of which involve these types of allegations. And it in a criminal trial, when you're going to put someone in jail, you want beyond a reasonable doubt. When you're deciding whether someone should be on the Supreme Court, that's not really the standard, which Dick Durbin kind of says, talking to George Stephanopoulos in the final news clip for you this morning over here.
If this hearing does take place, is there any way to really know the truth of what happened in that suburban house more than 3 decades ago?
In terms of direct evidence, probably not. The only alleged, underline alleged, eyewitness, this Mark Judge, has said he, quote, has no recollection, no close quote, of what occurred that evening. And the Republicans refused to even put him on the witness list so we could ask any questions about what he remembers. He was key to Dr. Ford's presentation. They will not let him get near the Capitol when we have sworn witnesses giving testimony. I think the Republicans have shown their uneasiness with their own defense by refusing to allow Mark Judge to testify.
As you know, it's not just Mark Judge. Apparently, Dr. Ford has identified 2 other people, including Judge Kavanaugh, who were there at that party. And now the 4th one has come forward, Leland Kaiser, and says she has no memory of being at a party with Judge Kavanaugh, doesn't know him. So of the 4 people that Dr. Ford says attended the party, none of them can corroborate her story.
Well, apparently that's true based on what you just said, but it also speaks to another thing. Dr. Ford has said from the start, let's have the investigation. Let's find all the people who might have some knowledge of it. You know, she's opened it to the investigation. It's Judge Kavanaugh, the Department of Justice, and the President who've said, no, there'll be no investigation. That, to me, speaks to her efforts to try to get to the bottom of this. And it's no surprise. If another person was in the room, or not in the room, but in the house that night and had no occurrence, like that, the one that was stated by Dr. Ford, there's no reason why they would even remember that party scene 36 years ago.
This is not a court of law, as you know. What is the fair standard of proof?
That is a great question. And it's a question I've thought about asking Judge Kavanaugh. What is the standard of proof? Is it probable cause, as we use in criminal proceedings? Is it beyond a reasonable doubt? Is it a certain percentage of accuracy? I don't know what it is. We're trying to come up with a reasonable standard here. But I think we understand the gravity of this situation. When someone steps forward and accuses another person of this kind of sexual assault, it needs to be taken seriously. We need to treat that person with respect and look at the allegations that have been made.
It sounds like what you're saying might be that old.
So, yeah, that's the end of the clip. Then he goes on to, like, I know when I see it, that I didn't even like but I thought that was important to show. That's Dick Durbin. He's on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's the second in command amongst the Democrats in the Senate. Maybe he's going to be the assistant to Chuck Schumer after they take the Senate. This whole Kavanaugh fiasco seems to make it more likely the Democrats will take the Senate. I mean, what's the standard? That's a question that Dick Durbin wants to ask Brett Kavanaugh, and it makes me think that I'm even not even sure that Brett Kavanaugh is going to show up to the hearing. All week it was, is Christine Blasey Ford going to show up? Now I'm wondering, is Brett Kavanaugh going to withdraw? I'm sorry. I was distracted over to the side here because I heard a jet, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this week, there's been a Capitol Air Show here in Sacramento, and it's Sandy over there, she got all disconcerted just when I mentioned it, or maybe she's hearing the plane. Sandy does not like fireworks. She does not like loud airplane noises, and it's made her very upset. Meanwhile, I promised the Sandy Dash clip. I'm going to show you that. Although before I do that, I want to thank all the people, the live viewers, all the people who gave Super Chat contributions during the show here. Especially that $100 contribution from My Earth there. I mean, I appreciate all the contributions, but I think My Earth gave me a $100 contribution about a month ago, and it was like a third of my YouTube revenue for that month, and probably will be this month. The other ways you can contribute, if you want one of these constitutions I showed earlier, you can be my patron on Patreon for $10 a month at a link in the video description, or you can give me a $10 contribution and provide your shipping address on PayPal at a link down in the video description. At the $5 level, here it is. Sorry, at the $5 level on Patreon or on PayPal, you get just this hashtag liberal viewer weatherproof vinyl sticker. I think it's a bumper sticker, but yeah, if you don't have a car, you can put it someplace else. Those are the other ways to support this broadcast. I hope you appreciated my insights, and as I promised, I have a 30-second compilation of not only Sandy being upset by this air show I was talking about, sandwiched in between two different Dash clips. I have had a lot more access to my cat Dash after my daughter went to her gap year program. Now Dash spends a lot of time on this chair. You'll see first chasing my fingers, and then, not the smartest cat in the world, he chases his own tail by the end of this clip over here. So that's 30 seconds of Dash and Sandy for the Dash and Sandy clips fans out there. Oh, Sandy just heard her name. She was happily snoring. Now she's picked her head up. But anyway, like I said, I'm overtime. It's 8:06. This program's 6 minutes overtime for what I had planned. I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out. I hope you enjoyed my commentary, my insights about what happened back in the freshman class of Brett Kavanaugh, Yale freshman class, what happened in Lawrence Hall, the drinking parties. Well, you know, he was in the Deeks also. I talked about that last week, the DKE, Delta Kappa Epsilon. Some more stories came out, and I remembered this slogan. It actually, I think it was from when I came back to Yale after Brett Kavanaugh had graduated and was at Yale Law School, but it is... So, you know, I mentioned hard drinking and misogyny. They went outside the Yale Women's Center and they were chanting, no means yes, yes means anal. And I remember, I think that might have been an incident after when Brett Kavanaugh was actually in the Deeks, but that is so representative of the misogyny that I remember. Of course, fraternities have a reputation for misogyny anyway, but that's what I remember about the fraternity that Brett Kavanaugh was part of. And anyway, like I said, that's the end of the program. I hope you appreciated all my commentary, and I will be back next week, next Sunday. Might be a little bit late because there's this concert I have to go to that I don't think I can do the broadcast before, so it may be like midnight my time, Pacific. We'll see how it goes, and just giving you a warning for the fans out there who watch all the way to the end, and maybe I'll be able to cover the Kavanaugh hearings if they actually take place on Thursday. I might do a special live stream on Thursday if that happens. Look for that. And anyway, that on Thursday, late on Sunday. And thanks for joining me. I'll be back sometime in the next week, and until then, I'll see you around the internet.